Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to talk about how you can perform MySQL database operations using Entity Framework Core and how you can use ASP.NET Core Web API with it to show your data in JSON format. For this demo, I'm going to use Northwind Database. We are going to use a script which will generate this database. I'll share that script in a moment here. But when we run that script, it generates the tables and data for these tables. It also generates a view that we're going to call from our web API. And it also generates a stored procedure that we're going to call from our web API. We are also going to see how you can load related data and show the data in JSON format in this web API. So let's take a look at the script. For that, I'm going to go to my GitHub repo, which is EF Code Database, all databases considered. Here I have MySQL folder. I'm going to open that. And in that, I have this database folder in which I have this Northwind SQL script, which generates the tables and the data for my database. So let's go ahead and run the script and see if it does that or not. For that, I'm going to go to my MySQL workbench. And here I'm going to create a schema. And I'm going to create a schema for Northwind and apply that. And then I'm going to select this Northwind database so that the script that I'm running will get run for this database. And then I'm going to open the script that I was just talking about, and I'm going to execute that script. Once I execute that, then you can see that now we have tables. I'm going to refresh my Northwind schema. Now we have tables and we also have data for these tables. We also have a view that we're going to call from our web API, and we also have a store procedure that we're going to try and call from our web API. So now let's go ahead and scaffold this database and call CRUD, stored procedures and views from our web API. For that, I'm gonna open my Visual Studio 2022 and create a new project. And here I'm gonna select Web API. And I'm gonna select ASP.NET Core Web API for C# and click on Next. And I'm gonna share this project with you on my GitHub account. It'll be in this MySQL folder. So if you go to EF Core, all databases considered, you'll find that project here. I'll push the project once we're done with the demo. And it also has steps that we're going to follow. I'll talk about that in a minute. So the name that I'm going to give for this project is going to be Northwind MySQL because we are dealing with MySQL database. And then I'm going to click on Next. Here I'm going to select framework as .NET 6 because this is the latest as of now. We are not going to select any authentication. We are going to configure our API with HTTPS. I'm not going to dive into Docker or what OpenAPI is, but we are going to create a controller which is created for weather forecast. So I'm going to click on create. This will create a ASP.NET Core Web API project which returns weather forecast for the next 5 days, and it's a random weather forecast. We'll run this project and we'll see if it's running or not. For that, I'm going to click on this Control F5 button, display button, which will open our browser and it will show the API which is running for this project template. So it opens Swagger. Swagger comes out of the box with ASP.NET Core Web API project, which makes it easier to call these web APIs. You can see this. We have this one web API, which is weather forecast. If I click on get, it's going to return weather forecast for the next 5 days. And it's a random weather forecast. So let's go ahead and see how the project is set up, and then we'll try to scaffold our database. So in this project, we have this program.cs. Program.cs is entry point for any .NET project. You can see that here we are creating a builder. We're using web application to create a builder. And then there is some code to add services into our builder in our application. And you can see that Swagger is one of the services that we just used. And then we are using builder.build to build the application. And then we are using this app to configure our app and run that app. So this is the program.cs. We are going to add some services here to make it work for our database. We also have weather forecast, which is just a model. It shows date, temperature in Celsius, and summary and temperature in Fahrenheit. And we have a controller which gets the weather forecast for the next 5 days, and it is random. So we are going to use this web API project to return the data in JSON format. For that, first thing that I'm going to have to do is add connection string in my project. So if you go to my repository here again, there are some steps that I've added. You can open this text file. There's some steps that are followed to make it happen, and you can use the steps too. I'm going to also put these steps in video description so that it's easier for you guys to copy too. The first step is to add connection string. So I'm going to add the connection string for Northwind database. The server is localhost. Database name is Northwind. User ID is root and the password is root. If you're using a sensitive application, please don't use user ID as root and root. Make sure that you're using a strong username and password. But for this demo, I'm going to use root and root. I'm going to copy this connection string and let's go ahead and add that in our project. For that, I'm going to open my app settings. This is where you can keep your connection string. And here I'm going to add a connection string. And I'm going to call it as NorthwindDB. And I'm going to pass that connection string here. Now we are going to use this connection string to scaffold our database. But before we scaffold, we are going to need to add some packages in our project. So let's go ahead and do that. For that, I'm going to right click on my project and open terminal. And you can add packages using NuGet package manager, and the commands that I'm going to run, you can also do that from NuGet package manager console. But I like to use terminal, but you can use NuGet package manager console if you like. So the first command that I'm going to run is to add some packages. The packages are going to be these two packages. The first package is Microsoft.EntityFrameworkCore.Design, and the second package is Pomelo and Entity Framework Core MySQL. So these are the two packages I would like to add. So one of them is a provider and one of them is going to help us scaffold. And we are going to use these packages so that we can scaffold and connect to our database. So I'm going to copy these two commands and then I'm going to come to my terminal here and I'm going to paste those commands. These commands will add these packages for my project. So if I go to my project now, you can see that these two packages are added into my project, right? Now we are going to use a tool that is going to help us scaffold the database. So if I go to my steps here again, you can see this, there is a tool that I'm installing. This is .NET tool install global tool, which is dotnet-ef. So if you do not have this tool, you can use this command to install that tool. I'm going to run this command to show you that I already have this tool. If I run this command, then you can see that it's showing that .NET-ef is already installed. If you want to update your tool, if you already have it, make sure that you're updating your tool. So you can run this command, which is .NET tool update global .NET-ef. And once you run this, then this will update your tool. I already have the latest version of this tool. And now we are going to use this tool to scaffold the database. And when I say scaffold, that means scaffolding will generate models and a DB context which will represent your database. So models will represent your database tables and context will map those models with your database table. So let's go ahead and run that command. That's the heartbeat of this demo. So this is the big command that we're going to run, which is going to scaffold the database. So the command goes like this. It says .NET-ef. EF is the tool that we just installed. And we would like to create a DB context. For that, we would like to scaffold a database that you can get it from this NorthwindDB. So NorthwindDB is the same name for the connection string that we're using here. This is the NorthwindDB that it's using. And then we would like to use the package that we installed, which is Pomelo.EntityFrameworkCore.MySql. And then the output directory for the models is going to be models. The output directory for the context is going to be data. The namespace for the models is going to be Northwind.Models. The namespace for the context is going to be Northwind.Data. The context name is going to be NorthwindContext. And we would like to forcefully run this command. That means if your database administrator is changing database schema multiple times, you can run this command again to update your models. And then I'm going to say that no on configuring. We don't want this method in our DB context because we are going to configure our DB context from services. So you don't need this whole huge command. You can just run this piece of the command to generate the models and DB context. But I like to pass some parameters to make my solution look nicer. So you can run this command. So let's copy this. And I'm gonna run this command. So this is going to build the project, and I want you to keep an eye on the solution. You can see that it'll generate data and models folders here, which will represent our database. So I'm gonna minimize this. And here you can see that it created this product model that you're going to create controller for. And this is same as what we have columns in our database. It also created one-to-one relationship with category and supplier, and it created one-to-many relationship with order details. So that has been generated too. Now I'm gonna go to this Northwind context, which is generated. So this is the database context class where it creates the DB sets, which is going to help us perform all the database operations. And in on model creating, it configures all the models with our database table so that it knows which model represents to which table. Now that we have this DB context and models, let's go ahead and add a service for this Northwind context so that we can use this service to create a controller. So I'm going to close all these files, and then I'm going to go to my program.cs. And just like the project template is adding some services, I would like to add some services here too. The service that I'm going to add is from my toolbox. You won't have this code in your Visual Studio. I added this code to make the demo go easier, but you can always get the code from GitHub link. I'll mention that link in the video description. But if you're looking for this code in your Visual Studio, you won't have this code. I'm going to double click on this toolbox to add some code for this demo. This code is adding a DB context as a service in my application so that I could use this service in my controller. It's throwing some errors. Let's go ahead and hit Control dot to add some namespaces so we can get rid of those errors. It's pretty simple line. It's just 4 lines of code. It's adding a service, which is DB context. This is the Northwind context that we just created, and in options I'm telling it to use Northwind DB connection string, and we're also passing the server version for MySQL database that we use. So these are the two things that we're passing in our DB context. Now that we have the DB context, let's go ahead and create a controller. For that, I'm going to right click on the controller and add a controller. And this is going to be a controller for API. So I'm going to select API, and then I'm going to select API controller with actions using Entity Framework Core. Here I'm going to add, and it's going to ask us the model that we would like to use for this controller. The model is going to be for product. We are going to deal with product today, and it's going to ask us the database context class. So I'm going to use this Northwind context class, and then the name is going to get assigned as products controller. Once I click on add, then it's going to add a couple of packages for our solution, and it's going to use those packages to scaffold a controller which is going to perform create, read, update, and delete methods, web API calls, and we're going to test them out in a minute. It takes a couple of seconds to scaffold and generate the code, but it should be done in few seconds here. Okay, so you can see that it generated a controller. The controller is getting injected with, actually the Northwind context is injected in this controller in its constructor so that we can use this context to perform operations. Now let's go ahead and run this first, and then I'll explain the code and we'll perform some CRUD operations. So I'm gonna quickly run this and show you how easy it was to start performing database operations using EF Core and ASP.NET Web API. So I'm going to open my browser here, and you can see these Web API calls which were created for our products. Here, I'm going to click on Get Products and click on Execute. That's going to connect to the database and get all the products in the system and show that in JSON format. You can also create a product. I'm going to copy this product, post product, and then I'm going to try and create a product. For that, I'm going to go to this post method and paste the product from this get API. And here I'm going to create a product that I'm going to name as Curious Drives Chai. I do make a good chai, so I'm going to add Curious Drives Chai here. And then I'm going to click on execute. That is going to create a chai, Curious Drives Chai in the system. Let's go ahead and find if we can find that product or not. For that, I'm going to go to this get product by ID API, and then I'm going to pass that ID here, click on execute. You can see that product is getting populated here too. You can also update a product. For that, I'm going to copy this JSON and then go to its put method, where I'm going to update Curious Drives Chai to Curious Drives tutorial, because I do make some good tutorials. And then I'm going to copy this product ID and paste it here, which it takes as parameter. And then I'm going to execute it to update the data. And now you can see that it got updated. If I try to find that product again, it will come out with the updated data. And finally, we can delete this product by using delete API. I'm going to click on try it out and click on execute. That's going to delete that product. If I try to find that product again, it's going to say not found because we just deleted that data. So this is how you can perform CRUD operations by creating the controller. Let's take a look at the code. So the code which got scaffolded is this controller. Like I mentioned, it's injecting context, Northwind dbcontext, so that we can perform these database operations. And it's getting all the products by calling this single line of code, which is context products to list async. It gets all the products. It also has a get product method API, which is taking ID as parameter. It's finding that product and it's returning that product. We have put product, which is taking the ID and the product. It's telling context that this entry has modified so that you can go ahead and update that entry. That's how we are updating the product. It's also creating a product by using this post method, HTTP post, where I'm passing the product. I'm adding that product into DB set, and then I'm calling save changes async to add that product into the system. And then I'm calling get product to get the newly added product. We have delete product where I'm passing the ID of the product. I'm finding the product. I'm passing that product into DB sets remove method, and then I'm calling DB sets save changes async method to remove that product from the database. So this is how you can perform the CRUD operations. Let's go ahead and load a related data. For that, I'm gonna open my MySQL database here. And here I'm going to run a query which is loading related data. Here I'm using inner join on my product table so that I could get the supplier for product chai. So if I run this, you can see this for product chai, exotic liquids is the supplier. I'm getting all the columns for the supplier. So we would like to get this information in JSON format. For that, I'm gonna add some code which is not going to work, but will add some service which is going to make it work for us. But I want to first show you what error you can face. So for that, I'm going to first add some code to load the related data. To load the related data, I'm going to use eager loading, where here I'm adding a API, which is get API. The name of the API is get supplier from product name, where I'm passing the product name as parameter and returning product. So in this API, I'm using context and product, and I'm using include to add my related table, supplier is related table. This is one-to-one relationship. You can also do one-to-many relationship. And I'm also passing the product name into where you can use link to perform to filter your data. So this is what I'm doing. I'm passing where here, and then I'm passing product name into it so that it could only get the supplier for the product name that we're passing. Now let's run this, and this is going to throw an error, but that's fine. We'll fix that error. If I go back to my browser here, it adds this get supplier from product name API. Here I'm gonna try it out. I'm gonna call this API for chai. And like I mentioned, this is going to throw an error. It says a possible object cycle detected. And the error is coming because we have not added NewtonsoftJson as a service into our application. So let's go ahead and do that. But first, we are going to need to add a package. So I'm going to go back to my steps notepad here, and I'm going to add this package, Microsoft.AspNetCore.Mvc.NewtonsoftJson package. I'm going to copy this line, and then I'm going to go to my terminal here, and I'm going to add that package into my project. And we're going to use this package to solve the error that we are getting. Once the package is added, then I'm going to go to my program.cs, and here I'm going to add a couple of lines of code to add that package's service, which is going to be add Newtonsoft service. And here, these are just 2 lines of code where I'm saying that, add services, add MVC, and add Newtonsoft JSON. And here we are telling in options that we would like to ignore the reference loop handling. And I'm going to add a namespace so that that error goes away. And that's all you need to do in order to fix that issue. So I'm going to run this again and see if we are facing any errors or not. And now I'm going to go back to my browser. And here I'm going to pass chai again and execute. And now you can see that we are getting the data, we're getting the product and the supplier associated with that product, exotic liquids. So this is how you can load related data. Let's go ahead and load a view. For that, I'm going to go again back to my API here and add a API, which is going to be for calling a view. It's just single line of code. It is get alphabetical list of products. So if I go to my my database here, and you can see this, we have this view alphabetical list of products. And if I select that, then it gets the list of products in alphabetical order. There are 77 products, and it gets them in alphabetical order. And that's what I'm doing. So when we scaffolded our database, it created this alphabetical list of product as the model and alphabetical list of products as a DB set that we're going to use to get the data. And that's all you need to do in order to call a view. So let's run this and see if it's calling our view or not. For that, I'm gonna click on that play button again, and then you can see this, it added an API, which is get alphabetical list of products. And here I'm gonna click on try it out and click on execute. And you can see it is returning all the products in JSON format in alphabetical orders. Now that we can call a view, let's go ahead and add some code to call stored. So this is going to be a little tricky, but we will figure it out. So the stored procedure that I want to call is this customer order history, right? So I'm going to add a new query here, and I'm going to send it to as procedure call. And here, I would like to call this stored procedure, but I'm going to pass alf key as parameter, and it will get products for alf key customer and the quantity of all these products. And I would like to get this information in JSON format. I would like to call this stored procedure from our ASP.NET Core Web API. So the first step is to create a model for this. When we scaffold the database, it doesn't create a model for the stored procedure. So we'll have to create a model for product name and total. For that, I'm going to go to my Visual Studio and create a folder which is going to only deal with stored procedures. It's not going to deal with data and the models that we have already scaffolded. The reason why I'm creating a new folder and creating new models in a separate folder is because I don't want to touch these folders which are getting scaffolded, because database administrator can change your database anytime, and you can just run this command to update your models and override the changes which are already there. So your changes are not getting lost. If you're making any changes, please extend your changes or create a different folder in which you can keep your changes. Here, I'm going to create a class that I'm going to call it as customer order history, which is going to be the model for our response that we're getting from stored procedure. I'm going to create a model product name and for total. So I'm going to use my toolbox here again, which is going to add a class. It's a simple class which has product name is string and total as integer. And now I'm going to add a DB context. So just like we scaffolded a DB context for Northwind context, I'm going to add another DB context, which is going to be only for stored procedures. So I'm going to add a class that I'm going to call as NorthwindContext, and I'm going to call it as for procedures, and I'm going to add it. And this is going to inherit from DB context. So I'm going to add some code to show you how we can map our customer order history model that we just created with our database response. So we created this DB set, which is customer order history for the model that we just created. And on model creating, mapping that entity with the properties with the database response. So this is where we are creating that model using model builder. Now I'm going to inject this Northwind context procedures as a service. I'm going to go to my program.cs, and just like we added a service for Northwind context, I'm going to add a service for my procedure too. I'm going to do that right here. And I'm going to say that this is going to be for Northwind context procedure. And now that we have this Northwind context procedure service, we can inject that in our product controller. So I'm going to go to my product controller, and just like we injected Northwind context, I'm going to inject Northwind context procedure, and I'm going to add procedure in front of it so that I can differentiate. And then I'm going to add that through my constructor. I'm going to add this Northwind context procedure here. Now that we have this Northwind context procedure, we can use it to call our stored procedure. For that, I'm going to go down to my API calls here and add another API call that I'm going to call it as calling stored procedure, which is get customer order history. In this, I am taking customer ID as parameter, which is string, and then returning customer order history, IEnumerable list of customer order histories. And you can get that from context procedure. The procedure, the service that we just injected, it has DB set customer order histories. I'm calling from SQL raw, where I'm calling the stored procedure and passing customer ID as parameter. And I'm saying to list async to get the data. Now let's run this and see if we can call the stored procedure or not. So for that, I'm going to run my project, come back to my browser here, and here you can see that this API got added. I'm going to click on that, try it out. Customer ID is going to be key, and here I'm going to click on execute. It's going to return all the information that we were seeing. So product name and the total number of quantity of the products that customer ordered in JSON format. So this is how you can call stored procedures. So this is how you can perform CRUD operations, load related data, call a view, and stored procedures for MySQL database using Entity Framework Core. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me on my Twitter and Facebook handle, or you can post the questions in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.